Welcome at Pizza and More. Sometimes I read that people buy any flour and afterwards they ask what to do with this flour or if there are any tips or any recommendations how to use this flour. And one of these flours is the Uniqua Blu. Yeah, I'm Jürgen and I will show you today a possibility how to use this flour. Of course, there are more possibilities available, more ways you can work with this flour, but one of these is this what I want to show you today. At first I want to say I have absolutely no payment from the mill, or I have absolutely no advantage that I tell you anything about this flour. This is really a recommendation from me to you because I use this flour very often in the meanwhile. And if you know my videos, in each video where I use a Typo1 or a Typo1 flour, I use exactly this one. Yeah, the mill itself says this flour is for high professional pizza bakers or hobby pizzaiolos who want always have the highest quality and the best baking results. As I already said, this is a Typo1, type 1 flour. The Typo1 flour is a flour which you can compare with a bread flour from a content of minerals and fiber. As you may know, all the fiber or the most of the fiber and most of the minerals are in the peel of the wheat, and if you mill lots of parts of the peel, then the flour normally has less protein because the protein is in the center of the wheat corn, and the fiber and the minerals are in the peel. If you want to know a bit more about flour and about wheat, in this video I explain almost everything. I said now a Typo1 flour or a bread flour has normally less protein. This is the truth. But this flour is totally different because the mill adds to this flour some additional gluten, and this is also written onto the package. Due to this, they reach a protein value of 15%, and the flour has a very high baking strength, so it has a W value of 380, which also means this flour, so the gluten structure of this flour is very, very strong and it remains over a very long period of time. The flour can take over a huge amount of water, so hydration from 70 to 80% is absolutely no problem because of the high W value and the high protein value. However, we need to let it raise also for a very long time. Otherwise, if we would let it raise only a short time, it could be that it is really chewy, it's not very nice, it would be like a chewing gum. So this flour is really absolutely perfect for making either a dough with a very long leavening time, so around about 72 hours. And it's also perfectly for making pre-dough like Polish or BIGA. And today, as I already said, we make BIGA. We make a 40% BIGA, which means 40% of the total amount of flour is in the BIGA. And our end hydration will be 70%. And now I would say we start with the BIGA. The ingredients for our BIGA are 200 grams of this Typo1 flour, which is, as I said, the Uniqua Blu. Then I have 100 grams of cold water, and I have here 0.6 grams of dry yeast. If you want to use fresh yeast, then multiply it by 3, so 1.8 grams. And by the way, as in each other video as well, the whole recipe and the whole procedure are in the video description. To start with the BIGA, we put at first the flour into a box, and then we distribute it a bit. Then we take our yeast and dissolve the yeast in the water. Normally the dry yeast is not dissolved in water, only the fresh yeast. But if we would add now the dry yeast onto the flour and then add the water and do the no stress method for making the BIGA, then it would be possible, and it will be possible, that the yeast is not distributed well in the flour. That's the reason why I dissolve the yeast at first in the water. And then we pour the water to the flour. And we start shaking the container. But we need to be a bit careful that the flour is not falling out. We could use the lid, but I let the lid now open so that you can see what I do. And then at some point, when you see nothing happens anymore, then you can take a spatula. You release everything where it sticks to the side or to the bottom. And then we flip the BIGA always around until no loose flour is more in the container. Of course, you could also knead the BIGA, but afterwards then you would have to tear it again. I had really absolute fantastic results with this method, and that's the reason why I make always the BIGA no stress. And then when everything is nice together, then we take another container. And then we fill our BIGA very loose into this other container. And then we have to close this container, but we are not closing it airtight. You can see I have here a bit open, and if you don't have such a mechanism to let it open, then don't close the lid totally. We let this BIGA now raise at room temperature for 1 to 2 hours, and then we put it into the fridge for 48 hours. I had the BIGA now for almost 48 hours in the fridge, and now it's time to make the main dough. For the main dough, we use the whole amount of poolish. Then I have here 300 grams flour, Typo 00. You could also use type 0. This flour has a protein value of 13% and a W value of 280. I have here 250 grams very cold water, 15 grams of fine sea salt, 0.6 grams of dry yeast, and again, if you want to use fresh yeast, then please use 1.8 grams. And now we start with the main dough. For the main dough we take the BIGA. You could tear the BIGA if you want, but you could let it also in one piece, it doesn't matter. Then we add the whole amount of flour, the yeast, and the half amount of water. And then we start kneading for around 2 minutes. And after the first 2 minutes we add the salt, and then we start adding also the rest of the water, but not all in one. We really add the water absolutely little step by little step. And now we wait until the whole water is incorporated, and then we continue with the second, and then little by little. When adding the water, you really have to be very, very patient. This is now, I think, the 10th portion, and you really have to wait always. It is really absolutely important that you be super patient, otherwise you will have only anger. Now when the whole water is in the machine, we continue kneading until the window test works. Also during kneading the dough you really need to be patient. It could be the case that the dough sticks. It sticks until you knead it 25 minutes and suddenly the dough stops sticking and is ready. It could be the case that the dough takes only 15 minutes. You really have to be that patient. You need to learn to read the dough, to see the dough, to listen what the sound of the dough is, and then you might know is the dough ready or not. One indicator if the dough is ready or not is definitely the window test. Therefore, I already covered my fingers with water, so to protect a bit the dough from sticking. Then I take a bit of dough and then I stretch it. And if I'm able to stretch the dough very thin, then you know the dough is ready and we can take it out of the bowl. When you have then the dough on your counter, then we make the so-called stretch and fold. Therefore, we take the dough from the left and from the right, we lift it, we put it back onto the counter, we stretch it here and we fold it over. And then we do this several times, and you see already here the surface of the dough gets strong. Don't wonder about the dark spots which are in the dough. These are for that kind of flour very typical, because these are parts from the peel. And then when the ball is nice shaped, we pull it, then we turn it again, we pull it, we turn it, the dough sticks to the counter and therefore the surface gets strengthened. And when we shaped a nice dough ball, we take a container or something like this, we place the dough ball in the container, we close the lid to protect the dough from drying out, and then we let the dough raise at room temperature for around 1 to 2 hours, and then we put it into the fridge for 12 hours. And now after round about 12 hours of leavening time, the so-called bulk fermentation is finished, and now we can make our pizza balls. The dough is developed absolutely fantastically, and now we take it out of the box. And now we make at first 3 identical pieces of dough. I think it will be around 280 to 290 grams each. Each of the dough pieces has now 285 grams. Now we shape our pizza balls. It's important, or it's recommended, to keep the side which was during the leavening on top, also on top. This helps us with strengthen the surface. For shaping the dough balls, we take always the dough and push it towards the center from the bottom. And so you can see it strengthens the surface. If you have already big air bubbles, you can open them. And when the surface is very strong, then you press the bottom together, or you have to guarantee that the bottom is closed. And then the first pizza ball is ready and it comes back into the container. When then the 3 pizza balls are shaped, it's very important to close again the lid from the box. And now we put the dough directly back into the fridge. And 4 hours before we make our pizza, we take the dough balls out of the fridge and let it rest for the remaining time at room temperature. If you have mozzarella which is in this salty water, then please take it out of this water, out of the package, and put it into a sieve before you cut the mozzarella into slices. Fior di latte is cut into sticks. So as I said, cut the mozzarella or even the fior di latte into slices or sticks and put them into a sieve so that all the remaining water and liquid which is inside of the mozzarella can drain out. Do this round about now, because now we have around 12 hours before baking, and then we avoid to have a real soggy pizza. And everything is now prepared. The ingredients or the toppings are prepared. The oven is preheated to 420 degrees. So you need to know we have now 70% of hydration. So the oven temperature, the ideal oven temperature is 420 degrees, so Celsius. The lower the hydration, the higher the temperature. So therefore with 65%, for example, we make always 450 degrees. Maybe then for 62%, for 60% hydration, 480 degrees. And if we have then 75%, for example, then also 400 degrees are okay. And now I would say we start with our pizza. You can see how perfectly the dough developed. To take out the pizza balls, it's absolutely recommended to take enough semolina. We put semolina on top of the dough ball we want to take out, and everywhere where the dough ball is attached to another dough ball or even to the side of the box, and we put enough semolina on the bottom. Then we use our spatula to release the dough. Here we need really to be very gentle, because if we stress now the dough, then it's not possible anymore to stretch the pizza properly, because then the dough is stressed and it's tough like a chewing gum. Therefore, I take now the spatula, I push all the semolina under, then I go under the dough ball, I lift it out, put it in my hand and throw it into a semolina bed. Now it's absolutely important to close the lid. Only so we can protect the remaining dough balls from drying out. Then we flip the dough ball several times in the semolina. We are here very gentle. We don't press the dough too heavily. And then we look that the dough is nice and round. And then we start pressing from the center towards the crust. We press all the air towards the crust. We let round about 1 to 2 centimeters crust over, and it's important not to press onto the crust. If you see the dough sticks somewhere, use directly semolina, because then the dough stops sticking. And if you have thick bubbles like this one, we can open it, because this would burn in the oven. You also could put the dough on the back side of your hands, and then you can stretch it as well, and then back to the counter. This is now not the final size, because the final size will be done then on the peel. The first we add our tomatoes. So to the tomato sauce I have here San Marzano tomatoes, one can, which is 400 grams, and 4 grams of fine sea salt. If you want to know a bit more about tomatoes, I made already a video about it, and the link is in the video description. Then we put the tomatoes onto our pizza. Then some fresh grated Parmesan cheese or Grana Padano. Then some fior di latte. Then some fresh basil. Normally I put the basil before the mozzarella, but honestly I forgot it. And now some olive oil. And you need to know, on a Neapolitan pizza is really less more. We want to taste all the different ingredients separately. If you want to have more cheese, no problem, then put cheese or whatever you want onto your pizza. To launch the pizza, we put some semolina onto the peel, we lift the dough and then we push the peel under. And now, as I said, it's time to shape or to make the final size. And then it's time for the oven. And here comes the pizza out of the oven. And then I would say we directly cut. And you can see how full of air this crust is. And now comes the best of the whole exercise. I taste the pizza at first from the center. And I can tell you this tastes really amazing. And now let me taste the crust. And I can tell you this crust tastes amazing. The BIGA and also this Typo1 flour, they did really a very well job. The BIGA brought lots of fantastic aroma and taste, and the Typo1 flour as well. If you like my video, it would be fantastic if you would subscribe my channel, and then we see us also in the next video. Ciao!